If you've watched any of my previous videos, you will know I'm a great fan of macro photography. Or perhaps more accurately, I should call it close-up photography. Because actually, it's very rare that I shoot at one-to-one reproduction, which of course is a true macro image. However, as much as I love close-up photography, I do find it very hard to justify the costs of a dedicated macro lens, which ultimately will probably only be used very rarely throughout the year. But the equipment required for macro photography doesn't always have to be expensive. So in this video, I'm going to discuss a simple way to allow you to take creative macro photography images on a budget. Good morning guys, and welcome to my local woodland where I've come out for a touch of macro photography. Of course, as I said in the introduction, really by macro photography what I really mean is sort of close-up photography. I think it's quite easy to sort of put close-up photography and macro photography into the same sort of bracket, and whilst they are quite similar, they're not really the same. Macro is about getting things life-size reproduction or even reproduced even more, as opposed to close-up photography for me it's just a case of photographing small things, filling a frame and trying to get a little bit of extract with the shots you take. Anyway, I noticed this group of mushrooms yesterday. Unfortunately, it absolutely threw it down, so I had to abandon any hopes of taking any shots yesterday. So I've returned first thing this morning, and to be honest, they looked a little bit better yesterday, but they still look okay. So I'm going to take this shot. I think it's a nice shot. I think they're a nice group of fungi, mushrooms, toadstools, whatever you want to call them. But first things first, I think I need to fit a polarising filter. There's a lot of glare from the sky above reflecting off the wet surface of the mushrooms, so I'm going to fit a polarising filter, and I'm also going to put you onto the live view of the camera so you can actually see what's happening. So as you can see from the live view shot here, there's a lot of reflections on these mushrooms from the sky above, and you can tell that just by putting your hand over and the sort of, it goes a bit darker from, obviously because my hand's blocking out the light. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fit a circular polarising filter, and now if we turn it, you will see the difference it makes. Look at that. It makes a huge difference. Can you see that? Can you just see how it's just cutting through the water on top of the mushroom, which basically is acting as a big reflector. It's still not perfect, but now I'm going to focus roughly there. Quite a slow exposure. This is why a tripod's so essential. But whilst it's still cut through the reflections quite well, it's still that little bit too bright as such. So the next thing I'm going to use is I'm going to use a reflector, but I'm not going to use a reflector to reflect light. I'm going to use a reflector to diffuse light. Just like that. And I think it's something like We seem to be getting quite a lot of reflection all around. Okay, I'll put that shot up now. I think you'll probably need a little bit of post-production on it just to sort of cut for the last bit of glare. But looking at the histogram, the histogram's looking quite nicely balanced. So I think that should process quite nicely. Now, whilst that's okay, I would like to try and focus a little bit closer. So what I'm going to do is physically bring my tripod closer and see how close I can actually get. And as you can see, I can't actually focus that close, and I do want to try and make the shot a little bit more abstract, really. Now, of course, there is a way around this. Now, in an ideal world, I'd just fit a macro lens now, and then I'll be able to get full to life-size reproduction, or at least 1 to 2, and know that I could fill that frame nicely. Because what I want to try and do is cut out a little bit of the wood and try and get a bit more abstract. But I haven't got a macro lens for this camera. I don't really have any intentions to get one either. What I do have, however, are a set of extension tubes. Now this is a 16mm one. Now all an extension tube is basically a tube, as you can see what's right through it. And what this allows me to do, it allows me to basically focus closer. I fit it on the camera body between the camera and the lens, which moves the lens out, which then moves the plane of focus, which then means I can get the camera actually closer. Thus, while not magnifying more, basically I'm getting the camera lenses getting closer, so effectively giving the impression of greater magnification. But it's more the fact that they'll just focus closer. We don't really need to think about all the geeky stuff of it. All we need to know is they will allow us to get a closer focusing, thus a more macro-like image. And that was it. That's that fitted. Quite painless. Alright, switch you back to live view. And now you can see that it won't focus. Back to 45mm on the lens. That's better. Okay, so as you can see now, we can now pretty much get frame filling and as you would have noticed, the focusing there was a little bit more of a faff on. Originally the lens was at 12mm when I fitted it, so that meant it was at its widest, and because of that I was struggling to focus. As soon as I put it to 45, it made it a little bit simpler. Enter a downside of extension tubes. But I quite like this one. I'm actually going to go for a square crop on it. very abstract, but to be honest, that's kind of what I'm looking for. I may also try it in black and white. Yeah, we'll see. Adjust the polarizer again. So yet again, I'm totally covered in mud. Now, what I've got here is got a nice simple shot of leaves, which is definitely going to be full size. So, Q menu. We'll go full free. Colour. Let's go to natural. But as you can see how he's hunting, he's just not finding anything. Basically, disadvantage with extension tubes, as you will probably realise by now, is the fact that you have to use focusing pretty much by moving the camera. And I'm probably going to be right on my subject. Look at that, that works. Now, I'm that close that when I'm adjusting the polarizer, hard to see what's happening. Because okay, I'm going to put that shot up. To be honest, I'm not entirely happy with it. I think I'm going to go to this leaf over here. I think this leaf might be more interesting. I think the water wasn't as nice as I would have liked on that one. So with this tripod, because I've got a centre column, I've basically set the tripod low. Right, so what I've done, I've actually, as I said before, I've got the camera as low as possible because I'm using the centre column, then I've lifted the centre column out, and now what I'm doing is shifting the centre column up and down to find that focus that I want. But I think I've got the shot I actually want here. I think I quite like this one. Bit of a, not the sturdiest, that's fine. But that could possibly work. But you can see there's a lot. I need to try and get off as much glare as possible. I'm going to try that. Now I've actually removed the extension tube for this one. You see the difference that Polarizon's making there? Simply because I think sometimes close-up abstract photography doesn't always have to be so close, and I just quite like the shapes of this one. So square crop, I think it's begging to be a mono actually. Nice simple shot, doesn't need to be f14 by any shape or form. f8, so I've switched back to the extension tubes simply because I want to get this little really small leaf here and basically totally fill the frame, so I'm not getting in the outsides of it. So it's in all fairness, that will be pretty much life-size reproduction on my micro four thirds camera, or very close if not. And I think what's interesting is if you listen, it's focusing pretty damn good. I can't say I'm really seeing much difference focusing with the extension tubes on as to focusing without the extension tubes, which is brilliant. But you know, as I said at the start of this video, I wanted to talk about budget macro photography. So you're probably asking the question by this point of, well, how much do extension tubes cost? Well, I bought a set from Amazon. These are metal construction. I bought a set of two for £35, which I think is an absolute bargain. I've been using the 16mm. The other one I think was over 10 or 12mm. I haven't used it. I can't really see myself using it. I think the 16mm is pretty good for what I need it to do. Now there are cheaper options. You can get cheaper extension tubes, but what you do have to watch out for is a lot of them don't have the electric contacts. So if they don't have the electronic contacts passing lens information from the lens to the camera body, what you find is you have no autofocus and no control over exposure and stuff like that. So you have to make sure you've got the electronic contacts. But honestly, for around 30 quid, to be able to transfer this 12 to 45 f4 Pro to a semi-macro lens, I think it's an absolute bargain. Anyway, I'll put that shot up I've just taken, and I'm going to try and find one final image for this video. Right, I think it's going to be something here. I think the woodland floor is just looking really nice. I think it's probably just going to be a simple sort of still life, almost detail shot. What I am going to do is I'm going to remove this extension tube and basically spend a few minutes finding the right subject. I quite fancy a square crop on this one. Okay, so interestingly, the composition I liked ended up actually not being particularly macro at all, and we're just talking this little section here, so I don't know, probably 4 inches by 4 inches. The beauty of anything creative, I think, is the fact that you don't have to be constrained by any rules as such. Just do what feels right, what looks right. I quite like this. One thing I'm loving about using a smaller lens is smaller filters. Now I'm fitting the polarizer again. I'm a great fan of the polarizer. In fact, the only reason I really took it off was because I was doing a handheld shot and I didn't want to have to increase the ISO. Okay, so that's dialed in, that's about right. But it was until I moved the camera. So that's about right. Quite a chaotic scene, this one. I quite like it. So I'm going to take that initial shot. Again, I'm on I keep saying a 2-second self timer, but actually I've set up the GH5 for a 3-second self timer. Now I'm going to try bouncing some light back into the frame. I'm a big fan of reflectors. They just basically, if you've got anything in the shade, what you can do is use your reflector and bounce some light back. And now this is a gold reflector on the one side, which means it bounces back gold, funnily enough, makes a little bit of warmth. Or you've got white, which is not so white as it used to be, but you've got white to bounce back just pure light. But of course, this is a budget macro photography video, and these are about, well, I think I paid 20 quid for this about 20 years ago, so I don't actually know how much they are now. I suspect they've gone up a bit. So really, you're probably talking virtually the same price as the extension tube, so that the price is starting to creep up. However, in a true Blue Peter moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a reflector. So here we have a cardboard envelope from Amazon and some tin foil, aluminium foil. All I'm going to do is put that round the cardboard envelope. Obviously, the cardboard envelope doesn't have to come from Amazon, it can just be a piece of card. So lo and behold, there you have a budget reflector which will work just as well as that one works. If anything, it bounces a little bit more light back because it's silver. You know, I'm a firm believer that photography doesn't have to necessarily be expensive. Really, I'd be more than happy using that if I didn't own that. Do I get a Blue Peter badge? Now, I think one final thing to note is sometimes what you actually want to do is not bounce any light in, and you actually want to try and get rid of as much light as possible to make that light diffused. Now again, this held in such a position that it will block the direct line of the sun, thus casting a nice big shadow over your subject. Gives you nice soft diffused light, which means that basically that your colours will look that little bit richer, and it works absolutely perfectly. Again, just as well as the more expensive option does. And here, this is an A5 piece of cardboard, you know, so they'll still fit in your bag. Sorted. And that's it, guys. Basically, a couple of ways that you can start shooting macro on a budget. Extension tubes, incredibly cheap new, even cheaper second hand, and a DIY reflector, which honestly costs next to nothing. And you have everything you need to start shooting creative macro photography images. Now, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be good to have other extras, like for example, if you've watched my video where I did shots with a black backdrop, or maybe even the one where I did the white backdrop, you know, one or two flash guns thrown into this equation really would transform what you can achieve. But the basics of just being able to focus closer and control your light a little bit more and bounce some light in, then really this is all you need. But really, I think with macro photography, what I always suggest is you try it out before you start investing, because it can be really expensive and it can be a bit of a rabbit hole that you fall down. And as I've said before many a time, I don't think photography has to necessarily be an expensive hobby, and you can try new things on the cheap. And I think really a set of extension tubes and a DIY reflector is a great way to get started with macro. Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give it a thumbs up, and maybe subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And I'll see you again soon for another one. Thanks for watching.